Imagine this. You wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, your heart pounding like a fist against your ribs. The dream is already fading, but the feeling lingers, a gnawing, unshakable sense that you've been running from something. Not a pursuer, not a monster, but something far more insidious, yourself. You sit up, gripping the sheets, and for the first time in years, you allow the question to surface. What am I so afraid of? The room is silent. The walls don't answer, but the truth is there, coiled in the shadows of your mind. You've spent your life constructing identities like fortresses, the successful one, the likable one, the busy one. Anything to avoid the terrifying stillness of being alone with who you really are. You've drowned the silence in noise, the emptiness in achievement, the doubt in validation. But here, in the raw hours of the night, none of that works. Here, there is only you. And the paradox is this. You've spent your entire life running from the one thing you cannot escape. You can change cities, lovers, careers, even philosophies, but you will always be there, waiting at the end of every road, every distraction, every false salvation. So what happens when you stop running? What happens when you turn and face the shadow you've spent a lifetime outtracing? Is it annihilation? Or is it the only freedom you've ever truly been denied? The answer is not in the noise. It's in the silence you've been taught to fear. And this is where the real story begins. The hidden problem and its psychological and philosophical roots. The fear of facing oneself is not an accident. It's a design, a carefully constructed defense mechanism refined by evolution, society, and the deepest recesses of the human psyche. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the repressed, disowned parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. We exile our flaws, our vulnerabilities, our darkest impulses to this unconscious dungeon, believing that if we ignore them, they'll cease to exist. But they don't. They fester. They twist into shame, self-sabotage, and a gnawing sense of fraudulence. And so we run, not because we are cowards, but because we've been taught that stopping means annihilation. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this evasion as the root of modern despair. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster, he warned. But what happens when the monster is you? When the very act of running becomes its own kind of monstrous self-betrayal. We bury ourselves in work, in relationships, in ideologies. Anything to avoid the existential vertigo of staring into our own depths. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this terror intimately. He saw human life as a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom, with avoidance as its only rhythm. We chase pleasure not because it fulfills us, but because it distracts us from the unbearable weight of self-awareness. And when the distraction fades, we crash back into the void, the same void we've spent a lifetime fleeing. Society, of course, fuels this evasion. Consumerism sells us new identities like costumes. Social media rewards curated personas over raw authenticity. Even spirituality can become another escape, a way to transcend the self rather than confront it. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the lie we live when we pretend we are not free, when we blame circumstance, genetics, or fate for the selves we've refused to become. But here's the cruel irony. The more we run, the more power we give to what we're running from. The shadow grows in the dark. The unexamined guilt metastasizes. The unlived life becomes a ghost that haunts every success, every relationship, every moment of false contentment. So why do we keep running? Because the alternative seems worse. Because we've been conditioned to believe that to face ourselves is to drown in regret, to collapse under the weight of our own failures. But what if the opposite is true? What if the running is the drowning, and stopping is the only way to surface? The unseen consequences. The tragedy isn't that we run from ourselves. It's what happens when we keep running. Slowly, imperceptibly, the evasion becomes its own prison. Relationships turn into performances, where you love not for connection, but for validation. Work becomes a numbing ritual, where achievement is just another way to outpace the voice whispering, "This isn't you." Even leisure becomes compulsive, binging, scrolling, consuming. Anything to avoid the silence where truth waits. Cognitive science reveals the cruel mechanics of this cycle. The brain, wired for efficiency, automates avoidance. Every time you suppress discomfort with distraction, you reinforce the neural pathways that make self-deception easier next time. It's a feedback loop of delusion. The more you run, the more your mind rationalizes the running. Of course I'm happy. Look how busy I am. Look how much I've accomplished. But beneath the surface, a subterranean self knows the truth. Culturally, we've weaponized this evasion. Social media platforms thrive on fractured identities. Each post a carefully edited fragment of a self that doesn't exist. Advertising preys on the dissonance between who you are and who you fear you should be. Even education systems often reward conformity over self-discovery, conditioning children to seek external approval rather than internal clarity. The philosopher Aldous Huxley saw this coming. In Brave New World, he warned of a society that anesthetizes itself with pleasure and distraction rather than face uncomfortable truths. But the real dystopia isn't some far-off future. It's the present moment, where millions live in self-imposed exile from their own souls. And the cost? A loneliness epidemic masquerading as hyperconnectivity. A mental health crisis dressed up as productivity. A world where anxiety isn't the exception but the norm. Because anxiety is what happens when you've spent years running from the very thing that could heal you. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Holocaust and author of Man's Search for Meaning, understood this intimately. He wrote that the deepest human suffering comes not from pain itself, but from a lack of meaning. And meaning can only be found when we stop long enough to ask ourselves, who am I when no one is watching? What do I truly fear? What would I dare if I weren't afraid of failing? But here's the most terrifying consequence of all. The longer you run, the harder it becomes to remember what you're running from. The shadow grows indistinct, a nameless dread. And one day, you wake up to find you've built a life perfectly designed to keep you from yourself. How to break free. The moment of liberation begins with a single, terrifying realization. You cannot outrun what you carry inside. No achievement, relationship, or distraction can silence the part of you that demands to be seen. The only way out is through, but the path is neither linear nor easy. It requires something radical, the willingness to stand still. This is where true rebellion begins, not with fists raised against the world, but with the quiet defiance of turning inward. Carl Jung's prescription was brutal in its simplicity. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. But to choose, you must first confront what you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Start with the body. It remembers what the mind has forgotten. That knot in your stomach when you lie to yourself, the tension in your shoulders when you force a smile. These are not glitches but signals. Sit with them. Breathe into the discomfort. The philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty revealed that consciousness isn't just in the brain, it's in the flesh. Your body is the map to the territories you've abandoned. Next, the shadow work. This isn't self-improvement. It's self-reclamation. Every trait you despise in others is a disowned part of yourself. Every judgment is a clue. Nietzsche's eternal return becomes a litmus test. What if you had to live this life exactly as you've lived it infinite times? The parts that fill you with dread are the parts begging for integration. Society will resist this. The modern world profits from your fragmentation. Social media algorithms will keep feeding you idealized versions of reality. Corporations will keep selling you products to fix your inherent incompleteness. This is where Sartre's radical freedom becomes armor. The understanding that you are condemned to be free, that every moment is a choice between authenticity and delusion. History's great liberators, from Buddha to Frankl, followed the same unexpected path. They stopped moving to find themselves. The Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree until illusion burned away. Frankl found meaning in the concentration camps by choosing his thoughts when all other freedoms were stolen. Their power came not from control, but from surrender to truth. Your rebellion won't look like a revolution. It will look like silence where there was noise. It will feel like grief for the selves you've buried. It will taste like tears when you finally meet the person you abandoned long ago. But here, in the ruins of your defenses, something astonishing happens. The shadow softens, the lies lose their power, and for the first time, you glimpse what was there all along. Not a monster, but a wounded child. Not something to fear, but something to finally bring home. The ultimate truth. The final, most powerful realization. Here is the secret no guru will tell you. The man who stops running doesn't find answers. He dissolves the questions. All those years spent asking who am I? What's my purpose? They were never inquiries but escape routes. The true self isn't something to discover. It's what remains when you stop pretending to be anything else. This is what the Zen masters meant by original face. The you before the world told you who to be. The paradox cracks open. The parts you feared would destroy you. The shame, the trauma, the unacceptable desires. were never obstacles to your wholeness. They were its ingredients. Jung was right when he said wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's the exiled wisdom your psyche couldn't afford to acknowledge. Now the final veil lifts. You realize the running wasn't just avoidance. It was creation. Every evasion sculpted you as precisely as any conscious choice. The failed relationships taught you where your boundaries truly lie. The career obsessions showed you what you thought would fill the void. Even the darkest nights of the soul were alchemical fires, burning away the false until only the essential remained. This is the ultimate rebellion. To look at your life, the pain, the mistakes, the unglamorous ordinary moments, and whisper, this too belongs, not as resignation, but as the most radical acceptance possible. The Japanese concept of wabi-sabi finds beauty in imperfection. Your life becomes art when you stop trying to edit its cracks. Now the most astonishing transformation occurs. Without the weight of self-deception, action becomes effortless. Decisions clarify. Relationships deepen, not because you've become perfect, but because you've stopped demanding perfection. The energy once spent maintaining facades now fuels living. You work not to prove your worth, but because creation is joy. You love not to be loved in return, but because love is who you are when you're not afraid. And when the old fears return, as they will, you no longer panic. You recognize them as echoes, not prophecies. You greet them like old acquaintances. Ah, you again. Come sit. I'll make us tea. This is true integration. Not the absence of darkness, but the ability to hold it gently. The man who stops running doesn't reach a destination. He becomes the ground beneath his own feet. And for the first time in his life, he is, finally, impossibly home.